Thank you, Lamise. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Recruitment Process Outsourcing and the evolving landscape of talent and procurement strategies for RPO services. My name is Sherry Hamilton, and I am honored to be moderating today's session. I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. I've got about 20 years of experience in human capital. I've had the privilege of being a talent acquisition leader and working with procurement, helping organizations as they transform their recruitment strategies. I've also had the opportunity to lead global talent solutions, optimizing recruiting operations, and guide businesses through that complex process to select the right RPO partner and technology solution, which is a lot of what we'll be talking about today. And as I mentioned, I'm very honored to be moderating this session. We'll take a deep dive into best practices and how we partner with your RPO counterparts and also internal stakeholders, understanding what the nuances of procurement are and exploring the impact of the advanced technologies that we have at our fingertips today that shape the future of RPO. We're joined by two incredible panelists who will share their unique insights from their perspective in talent acquisition and procurement. Joining us today, we have Mr. Michael Stringer, Chief Procurement Officer, and Gloria McLennan, Talent Acquisition Expert. Michael, can I call on you to make the first introduction?
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, Sherry and Lamise as well. Looking forward to the discussion today. Good afternoon to everybody. The fun part of this is I get to talk about procurement, which I love. I'm a procurement leader and practitioner. I have experience from consulting across many industries, as well as most recently, the head of global procurement for a Fortune 500 insurance company across 40 markets. So again, I remember when I started my career, I was actually sourcing and partnering with HR leaders for RPO solutions. And then I've moved around the globe as my career progressed. And I've operated globally, regionally, and in the country. So what you're going to hear me talk about today is, and when we think through the partnerships that RPO providers have, right? How do you build something that's fit for purpose for your clients, as well as also thinking about our HR leaders and our talent acquisition leaders, right? And the things that are probably important to you as well, and to consider when you're starting to think about maybe your existing relationship or a brand new relationship, right? So let's have fun with it. I'm going to pass it over to Gloria, and let's get going.
Hi, everyone. Gloria McLennan here. And I am a global talent management strategic sourcing enthusiast. This is probably a good way to describe that. Sourcing and strategies and solutioning and implementing talent-related programs continues to be my passion. I'm excited to be here today to talk about this. And we're in the midst of another evolution in talent, right? And how we're going about engaging it and what we're going to be using. And so I'm excited to be a part of this next evolution of talent, if you will. And I come out of the global solutions as well. Yeah, I've had a very fabulous career. I've been on the talent acquisition side, strategic sourcing side, buying these and selling and implementing. So it's been an amazing, amazing journey. So I'm quite pleased to be here. And let me thank you very much for having me. And I'm quite honored to be part of the panel with Michael and having Sherry moderate for us as well. So exciting times ahead.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, Michael. And it sounds like we've all sort of been all around that talent procurement and RPO strategy implementation component. So we're going to have a great panel today. So just a little bit of information about what we're going to cover today. As we all know, the recruitment landscape for 2024 has experienced its challenges, including economic constraints, the fluctuating hiring needs, the ever-evolving advancements in technology, which we'll continue to see, by the way, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, alongside some very cautious spending, which have led to what we're going to see in 2025, which looks like it's going to be a recalibration. As we enter the new year, we're anticipating a refocus on what recruitment strategy looks like, and which brings RPO front and center and positioned very well as these recalibrations take place. I want to really highlight the fact that scalability, flexibility, and simplification of process, and we'll hear more about those from our experts, and providing that data transparency for our client partners are going to be front and center here. Clients are looking for that partnership, the expertise, the leadership, support, and guidance. As we look at the coming years for RPO growth, in 2022, the global recruitment process outsourcing market was valued at about $7.3 billion, and it's expected to grow at about 16.1% from 2023 to 2030. We'll hear our panelists talk about how data helps them make big decisions and how AI, which I'm sure everyone's excited to hear about, and technology will play a huge part in the growth of RPO by giving us that simplification and helping develop the employer value proposition. Let's not forget just how important it is to maintain the human touch, which I'm hoping we're also going to hear a lot about, increasing transparency, how that's going to break down barriers across the entire organization. I think we've all seen that, how barriers get thrown up between talent and procurement and HR and technology. And I think we'll hear a lot about how we go about breaking those down. And if I know these two, they'll also talk about multi-generational workforces, and how critical they are to our future proofing of the workplace and bringing the right skills together. So as enterprise RPO continues to lead the market share at approximately 69% on the global front, we're expecting that healthcare will outpace the rest by around 18%. But before I begin, I want to encourage you all to engage with us by sending in your questions. And depending on the type or the nature of the question, we'll either address it right away or we'll save it until the end. And I'll be interacting with you as you enter your questions into the chat. And so let's go ahead, and Gloria and Michael, are you ready? We'll go ahead and start with question number one.
Let's go.
You guys are always ready. Okay. What changes from a procurement and talent acquisition perspective do you expect will experience in 2025?
Loaded question, right, Gloria?
It's a great question. Yes.
It's great. And both you're going to see Gloria and I probably ping pong back and forth on this as well, and Sherry, and for the folks on the webcast today, what I'm seeing, right, as I talk to business leaders and so forth like that, it's a lot around the simplification. Sherry, like you just talked about, how can an RPO solution simplify our businesses? And by the way, all your clients' businesses are challenging, right? Everybody has hard processes. They could probably have some enhancements and so forth. So again, something to consider, HR leaders are looking like for something that is, how do we simplify our candidates' experience, right? Because again, when you think of it, you're the first interaction they may have into the enterprise, right? So I look at it from how do you simplify the operational experience? There's going to be AI there too, like everybody, like Gloria, we were talking about it the other day. Every organization is looking at where they can inject AI broader than just HR, finance, legal, etc., right? Even from a procurement standpoint, right? Like it's here, right? But then also we have that human touch, right? So I think, like Gloria, I'm bumping around a bit because, everything we do, we want to make sure that we have a simplified process internally, like with our internal stakeholders, right? How we make it easier, but then also the candidate experience, data, like Sherry, you hit on it, right? So I'm not going to go too deep because if we do, then we'll have to backpedal. So I don't know, Gloria, your thoughts on just simplification before we dive, because there's other areas too, right?
Yeah, simplification is such a key these days, right? What I find in my experience in working with clients is we have a lot of, I don't want to call it old technology, but unnecessary technology that we're using and going through the process. And I think people are concerned about, if we remove it, what do we replace it with? How do we go about that? But it is necessary. And I keep thinking of the thought process of, we need to be thinking agile. How do we work better? How do we work faster? How do we streamline these processes? What can we cut out and move along, right? That we don't need anymore, that has just been there setting, right? Which in many cases is very hard for companies, right? And as far as AI goes, I have read books. I have taken a couple of classes. I think that it is going to certainly be beneficial for our business. We need to be more agile again and move faster as well, right? And again, a lot of it has to do with that candidate experience. How do we make all of that work so that there is still an emphasis on how that candidate experiences, whether it's the interview processes, whether it's the onboarding process, or whatever it might be, because that is a determining factor these days with candidates and their decisions, right? You could have the most perfect candidate, and you want them, and there's something that in that whole process, right, that did not work for them, right?
Back to the human touch, right? I mean, because
Right,
again, at the end of the
exactly.
day, you know,
Excuse me.
even the line of business stakeholders I
Yeah.
talk to, like they want to make sure that again we find top talent. They have a good, strong pipeline, right?
Right,
And
right.
then, but then also ensure that again, back to that candidate experience, because if you've got a candidate that it has a couple options and it is challenging and they've done things multiple times and things take a long time, you run a risk, right? So at the end of the day, that's really the key, right? That's got to be something that we talk about as well. Go ahead. I cut you off, Gloria.
No, that's okay. No, for sure. I mean, you're 100% on page with that. It is that personal touch, I guess is a good way to describe it.
And Gloria and Michael, I love what you're talking about, the direction you're going with the human touch too, because we all have to work together at the end of the day, right? If AI is going to help hire us, we still all have to work together and get along and have the same sense of culture that the organization has. So really important that we maintain that human touch.
Well, and I think that part of when we think about, the culture and the business objectives and the branding, that all fits into that whole candidate experience, right? And how we're engaging them, whether we're doing it ourselves, whether we're using an RPO provider, that is all part of that process and how we need to all work together to bring that to life, so to speak, and bring that out to the candidate, right? I think it falls under that, also falls under the employer value proposition, right? It's all evolving. It's a critical part of it, and especially with many things that have changed in the industries today, right? Every industry is different. So when we're looking at those employer value propositions, how does it pertain to the specific industry, right? And the branding as well. It's a big bucket to work through for sure. We have a lot on our plates as talent acquisition leaders and engagements and our RPO providers as well.
It really is, and I'm going to throw kind of a curveball out there at you, maybe, Michael. So when we think about AI, what's most important to you in your role as a CPO from an AI perspective, and then we'll also talk about it from a candidate experience perspective.
Okay, because I've got the view of as a procurement leader, right? I'm looking at individually my business, just like an HR leader would, or a finance leader as well, right? How do we take out sometimes manual processes and then take out additional steps like Gloria was talking about, like how do we stop doing things? And sometimes even from my consulting days and even like industry days, right? Some companies, whether they're early in their evolution or they've been around greater than 100 years, they pick up things and the process sometimes gets convoluted, right? And more challenging. So you definitely want to be able to leverage AI to actually cut through that, right? Take steps out, speed up the process as well. When I put the hat on from when working with our HR business partners and so forth like that as well, we look at it to say, one, and I hear them talk about how do we find the right candidates, right? But then also ensuring that you have the right controls in place, right? So there's not a bias and so forth as well. That's a whole nother area, right? But they're going to be they're thinking about it, right? We're all thinking about AI internally, but as an RPO provider, you have to be able to talk to that, right? So even if you're going through a sourcing process, right? You're you're coming into a new business, you're trying to win business. Even if your potential client doesn't ask about AI, you better be talking about it, right? Because the majority of like leading edge, they're already doing it, right? And then you've got other firms that are like, hey, sort of let's wait and see, but we're still interested. And then you've got others who are like, whoa. So you've got to be ready for that, right? You've got to be able to talk about where you are using technology and AI, right, to simplify their business too and make things easier for them. So that was long-winded, but again, you've got to be ready for that. And then, oh, by the way, for our HR leaders on the call and our talent acquisition leaders, you should be asking about that, even if your organization's not, right? So if you've got a really good procurement team, which I hope you all do, they should be also guiding you as a business partner, right? To say, okay, these are the things going on in the marketplace. These are the things we should be asking about. But again, as we go through today, you should hopefully have a checklist, right? To say, these are things as a TA or HR leader, right? These are things I should be asking about. But definitely RPO provider, same thing. I'm going to flip the script and also say, yes, you should be talking about these things regardless in your sales pitch. And then, oh, by the way, even after you win the business, right? So you're going to hear me talk about, and Gloria, you've heard me, we've all been part of the process of helping clients through this in the past, right? Even your year one, year two in your relationship, you should be every year aligning with business objectives. Where are you,
100%.
right? From your HR strategy? Where are you from a tech strategy? How are we aligned? That way, you don't find yourself in an RFP process, right? If they love you so much, again, those are the things that you're going to continue to evolve as well. So I took that far. Sherry, Gloria, what did I miss?
Well,
I love what you said. I'm sorry there, Gloria. I was just going to throw that out there to you too. When RPO approaches you from a talent perspective, what do you want to hear about AI?
well, I want to understand, first of all, what their tech stack looks like. What have they done? What are they improving? What do they have to bring to the party, so to speak, right? How are they going to build that people strategy, and help to create that workforce, that future ready workforce, right? Because that's all part of that whole technology piece of it, right? But I really want to understand, what does their tech stack look like? What is their CRM? What are they doing? How are they building their pipelines, and how are they sourcing based on specific industries as well? What is their plan? Because every industry is different. We've talked about that, right? And so that workforce is going to look different. What are they doing to address that? Is that their niche? I have a list of 14 questions that go far, because I love my list, that go for talent acquisition leaders, HR folks, but it's also the same sort of questions for RPO providers, right? Because the one thing that is important as we think about this journey, collaboration is a key, cross-functional collaboration, transparency, and also partnerships. And I think that is our key to success, is getting everyone on that same page in the same room, right? To build out the strategy for that workforce. And also understanding what's coming next. What is coming next? And we need that from our customers, and we need that from our RPO providers as well.
Mm-hmm.
My expectation, if I put my sourcing hat on, has always been, what are you going to tell me? What's going on in the industry? How is it going to impact my business? I have a very specialized business. How are we going to address that? Short term and long term, right? How is that going to look? And conversely, so being on the talent acquisition side and hiring, engaging talent, talking to my team members, cross-functional team members, what are you looking at? What are the needs going to be? How are we going to source that? It's a big job. Talent
Yes.
is talent makes our world go round, and gotta have the right talent, right?
You hit on a couple of things that are interesting, right? So of course I immediately went to my the tech stack, right? Like every organization is also, so where you can plug, your technology in, is it better? Can you help your your client, right, or potential client, right? Like you're trying to win business. How can you help them sunset some of their tech, right? Because that's always something
Right.
to manage too, right? I always think through that, and from my consulting days and my industry days, there's times that it's like, what is on our tech stack? Why do we have so much? What can we sunset? How can we simplify that too? That's a whole nother realm of simplification, right? But if you bring a solution that can help your client, right, as an RPO solutions provider, and you can help your client sunset a few systems, beautiful, right? So just keep that in mind too. And then Gloria, you hit on, again, that business partner, like relationship, strategic partner, right?
Right.
It's expected for you to be that way, right? So
Yes.
from a procurement standpoint, we're going to be like working with the line of business as we're evaluating, right? New business and existing business of like, how's the relationship, right? What are they bringing to the table, right? Or how are they helping you understand the external market, right? Yeah, so it's almost back, Sherry, you and I were talking, right, about, again, what makes a customer happy, right? And it's that relationship. And you have to be careful too, because sometimes like an RPO solution can be great year one, year two, but then, there's changes in leadership, maybe within the company, the enterprise, changes in leadership of RPO. You've got to keep your finger like you've got to keep a pulse on that, right? So even at a minimum, you're sitting down, going through and saying what's changing in your business, right? Right. And Gloria, and Sherry, that could be, what are you guys thinking, right? Where are you going from an HR talent standpoint, right? What are you looking to do? Here's what, because again, you never want to you always want to be aligned, right? So that's one thing I see occasionally. And again, Gloria, Sherry, chime in as well. You get like year 3, year 4, year 5 down the road.
Right.
And that, I almost want to say, the relationship sort of cools, right? And you're like, oh, okay. And it's hard to implement an RPO solution, right? So companies don't like enjoy, changing one out, right? And a lot goes into bringing one in and changing a business, right? So I don't know. I'll stop there.
Well, and I think and a couple of points you made there too, because what I see now happening is that because of our overall economic climate, how things have changed, businesses change their business model. So one day they're building something, right? A widgets and widgets. That business slows down and all of a sudden they've got to course correct and start a different product or start a different service. And how does that impact the talent and how they're going to get that talent? And how does that impact the RPO provider and how they need to be able to switch gears too, to adjust to this new business model? That is some of the bigger challenges that I've seen out there recently, right? And where does that talent come from? And, and how do you upskill that talent to it rather than replace? How do you upskill that talent to address the new business model, right? It's a very interesting dynamic.
Gloria, Michael, I think I'm hearing a common theme here. I think I'm hearing something I like to say is, innovation is not what we're going to read about today in HRO magazine. It's what we are going to innovate that is going to be written about 6 months from now, right? So continuing to keep things fresh, keep that innovation going. That's what you both want to see in your respective roles, is what kind of innovation are you bringing to the table, and continue to bring that, right?
All right. Absolutely.
Trying to think, how are we doing on time, Sherry? Because I'm just
So
we could keep going, right?
We could keep going, and we've got a few more minutes for this question. And I just now we talked about AI, and now I want to talk about the other side of that coin, right? The human touch. So let's kind of touch on, where do you see that human touch being so critically important, and why? How does it impact culture, etc.?
Laura, you want to hit that one? I can chime in.
Yeah. The human touch from my perspective, right, it is the critical one. And how do we, we're doing interviews on platforms. We are going through those processes, which has been happening for quite some time. But how do we pull out of that and get back to a closer relationship with that candidate, right? I just think that is a critical point in this, that when you're talking with a candidate about a position, that they are understanding more about the business and what the culture is. And the culture can be many different things, right? It's a very broad perspective. So, how are you fostering growth? What does my future look like? How do you have plans for me? What are you doing from a business perspective to help educate us? Are we being paired with people who are, when we think about the multi-generational topic that we talked about, who am I going to be working with? And you're pairing me with someone who can increase my knowledge. So there's so much human touch for me, process so many boundaries, right? There's multiple ways. Mike, I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but those are some that come to my mind on a regular basis.
I mean, I look at it as like human touch isn't going away, right? I mean, it's got to be there, right? So you if we were to move away from that, you would have challenges, right? From the employer value prop, right? What sets your business above, right? So, all the HR leaders I talk with, nowhere, right? Like that's the key. And those are going to be the discussions that happen to ensure one, as they're looking at candidates and how successful they are in bringing candidates in too. That's going to tie back to the data too. So Sherry, you're seeing me go back and say, absolutely, if you go through, as you work with procurement leaders and line of business leaders for any RPO solution, again, having that data, I'm switching, Gloria, because I was thinking through this. I was like, you've got the human touch, right? But then you're also looking at the data, right? So you can make decisions quickly, right? And also very transparent, because when I sit down with HR leaders, they need to look at their total population, right? Of their business, right? So their FTEs and their contingent workforce. And oh, by the way, there's a risk component around that too, right? Like, how are we protecting the business? We've got, so there's so much that goes into it. I don't see that going away with AI, right? And there's gonna be more and more focus to ensure that we have that, right? But and then even with my procurement hat on, right, too, right? As I'm bringing individuals into my business that partner across the globe, right? And work with leaders at the global region and country level, right? I've got to make sure that I have top talent, right? That aligns with our business culture wherever you are, right? So that goes back to that fit for purpose. You're going to hear me talk about that as you go into relationships too. So I jumped around from human touch, 100% agree, right? You can't get away from that, or you're going to you will have challenges, right? And, bringing individuals in, and then also keeping them too, right? That's a whole nother challenge, right? So, all right.
Right. I just
Right,
think
so
that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I love where both of you guys are going with that, and I'm just keeping an eye on time. I don't have any questions yet, so I wanted to throw one more question out there, Michael, which I know is going to be near and dear to your heart before we move on to the next topic. But how important is cost?
People always think like procurement only cares about cost. So at the end of the day, I always say cost just so good procurement organizations, right? And leaders, right? They partner with the line of business, right? Line of business has a budget, right? But really at the end of the day, it's important, but it's not the key driving factor, right? So that's where we talk about having a strong partnership with your HR leadership, right? To ensure, one, you're delivering on, right, their key objectives. Like maybe your stakeholder wants standardized processes globally, right? They want better data so they can understand what's happening around the globe from their their workforce, right? So I would say I'm a different type of procurement leader where cost, it's important, but again, at the end of the day, if you're, delivering against, your HR leaders like objectives, cost, it works out, right? So again, and by the way, and Gloria has heard me say this, I was like, any RPO provider, if all you're doing is getting beaten up on price, you should maybe question, like,
Right.
is this a relationship we want to be in? Because, you know, and I have a finance background, so yes, I get it. But you've got to make sure you have solutions in place that meet objectives or you won't be there, right? So, so it's interesting, right? So we could have fun with this, but I'd say you've got to make sure that you align with the budget, right? But at the end of the day, you deliver for your HR leaders a solution that they can't live without, and we have top talent coming into the organization, which talent's the most important thing in any organization. Gloria, we've talked about that. You could have the best product or services, but your talent is the key, right, to your business, right? So I'll stop there, Sherry.
Well,
All right,
I'd like to add something to that too, if I might too. So when we
Perfect.
think about, because I just recently went through, this cost analysis for bringing on talent and technology, and I look at it and say, that cost that we're looking at is going to come back twofold to us, because the talent that we bring on board, the technology that we're using that helps to engage that talent and identify the talent and bring it on, is going to add revenue to that bottom line. So we're going to recoup that cost, right? By bringing on the right resources that will contribute to the continued growth and success of a business. That's my.
I'm so glad you added that, Gloria, because I was just going to say, it sounds like the theme here is there's a cost of quality, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
And you should question, right? If again, and I've heard horror stories from providers that are like, hey, procurement just like beats us down. I was like, well, hold on a second. You've got to make sure your line of business is happy, right? And then you should also challenge, right? Because again, both sides have to be happy to coexist too, right? So yeah,
Right.
it's good.
all right, so let's go ahead, and I'm looking at the time here. I still don't see any questions, so we will move on to our question number 2, which is, what are the most significant challenges talent and procurement teams face, and how do you see 2025 shaping the future for the way organizations select and interface with RPO providers as they look to future-proof their organizations when it comes to skills, process, technology, and the human factor, and that all-important culture piece? I know that's a loaded question.
It is a really loaded question. We talk about a talent shortage. There's a talent shortage, and there is a talent shortage. I think there are talent shortages in certain different types of positions in industries. We have new industries coming about, climate related industries, wind energy companies and things of that nature. And there is not a great deal of talent who has that experience. So I see that as a challenge, right? With new industries evolving. And so how do we cope with that, right? And then the evolving skill requirements that are associated with that. That is a challenge, I think, that is ahead of us. And so how do we, not just looking at corporations do it, but as a populace, how do we help with that, right? How do we contribute to that? And you integrate technology into that as well. And so how do we make that happen? I think that is our biggest challenge, is the evolving skill sets that are going to be required. And part of that is a function of AI. Where is that talent going to come from, right? And again, new industries that are coming about. How do we get those folks upskilled or get them skilled, period, in different industries that have not existed in the past? I experienced that with one of the companies that I worked for. Wind energy is new, and a lot of technical people and engineers and offshore people, where do you get them, right? It's a challenge, and it's not one that we cannot conquer, right? But it requires a plan. So,
And that's maybe an area, as I think about what I've done with RPO before, that's maybe an area where RPO can really help in future proofing, is to help organizations look at what does the future of the skills that they may need in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now. What does their business look like? Because RPOs tend to deal or work across multiple types of organizations and businesses, and they can see that. Whereas Gloria, you and Mike in your roles might be sitting within one organization, right? So they're seeing it from a very broad perspective. So certainly something that we would look to our RPO providers to advise on.
exactly.
That is, because that's, I mean, Gloria, dead on. It was one of the top things I jotted some notes, and I was like, finding top talent, that's yes, got it. But also the benefit of an RPO is, again, they go across industries and they can say, oh, by the way, potentially a great area for you to plug from is here, right? And then that is key, right? And also, again, being able to test, and then you have the data to see the success rates, right? From as you pull from other, so I'm sort of linking it all together, but the benefit of that, right, is like, hey, oh, by the way, Gloria, great example, right? It's a brand new industry, skills, like, yeah, there's not unicorns sometimes, right? And you have to be able to be creative, right? To say there's certain skill types that from other industries we can pull from. And it goes back to that multi-generational experience, right? From people or individuals that are early, mid, and late career, right? That can come and you can pull from to help build out too. So that's key. Good point. Yeah, that's good there as well. Some of the challenges too, like I was trying to put my RPO hat on, right? And just when I work with HR leaders, because again, I remember my role, I go across and talk to the CMOs, the CFOs, I'm in operations, I guess. So I talk to all of our leaders, but thinking from an HR standpoint too, right? So, everybody, you have to ensure that some of the challenges, right? You have to keep this in mind, like always have, how do you simplify, right? All the relationships you have as you come into a new relationship as an RPO provider, look at the process today, right? How can you make that better? Simplify that for your new business partner, right? To say, here's how we're going to streamline. Oh, by the way, it could have taken you X numbers of days to actually, go through an interview process, onboard, etc. Right? Good. We're going to beat that, right? How are we going to do that? Because that does tie back as well, Gloria, to, and Sherry as well, the candidate experience, right? We've all been part of this, right? And oh, by the way, I buy resources as well, right? As in procurement. I'm like, dear God, it's going to take me 3 to 4 months to actually backfill this role, right? Or to fill this role. How do you have the data, right? To sit there and say, oh, by the way, we've changed these processes, right? We're streamlining this, right? So that you can get the right talent, right? And so forth as well. So I jumped around a little bit there as well, but Gloria, Sherry, anything else that I missed there? Just thinking those are challenges.
I like what you said about that. And the other thing that an RPO has or should have a very unique perspective on is they're seeing and so let me take a step back here. We all know that we're going to need to, at some point, change skill sets, right? Grow our skill sets. That's everyone's career path is going to change slightly, right? And the things that we know today will be very different than what we need to know tomorrow and the next day and next year. So RPOs will have a very unique perspective on, if we don't have this skill set in the marketplace today, what is the next best skill set that we can bring from to grow into those unicorns? So how do we start our own unicorn farm?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Hopefully our TAs on this call are taking notes as well, right? To say, okay, because these are the things that we should be asking, right? And clearly they probably are, right? But it's the evolution of the skills that we're going to need for the future, right? You've got an existing RPO provider, right? You should be asking that question. They should be coming to you and talking about that, right? and again, it goes back to that, how do we continue to, you're meeting on a regular basis, right? To talk through as businesses change, and they change quickly. So I'm trying to think what else. Fit for purpose, like that's a challenge too, right? So sometimes if you've got a large global relationship too, that's a challenge.
Complexity, yes. The
That's
compliance
a,
associated with and complexities associated with that as well.
yeah, it is. It's not easy. But ensuring that you can support the business wherever they operate, right? So, and yes, that is not easy, but, and again, and I've worked in the regions and at the country levels, right? It's like, okay. But thinking through that as you are in relationships, right, with your customer, right, as an RPO provider, as an HR leader internally, you're thinking through like wherever I operate, my talent, how's my RPO provider going to be able to solution that? If you have gaps, how are we going to work through that? Right. So because depending on the markets you're in, right, sometimes it's challenging, right? But that you have that visibility, you have the data to understand where we have potential areas that are concerned versus the noise that could bubble up, right? So again, I've been at, I've had a small country like, hey, you're killing my market share, right? Because I can't find people. The beauty of this is if you have good data and you understand what's going on and the success rates and so forth like that and the times, you can understand that before the noise even comes. That's a perfect world. So anyway, I'm thinking through that. All right.
Great point. So we've got about 6 minutes left for this last question here, because we are now getting a couple questions coming through here.
Okay.
So Mike, what's the main takeaway as a procurement professional, and Gloria, you as a talent acquisition professional and direct users of RPO services, want other RPO end users to gain from today's discussion? I know you've touched briefly on some checklist items, but
Yep.
anything that we may have missed?
I think, go ahead, Gloria. Hit it.
No, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I was, it goes back to you simplify, right? Every leader I talk to, right, says we need things to be easier, right? That data transparency, you've heard me talk about that through this process and the discussion today. Human touch, making processes easier, right? Simplification. And then probably just the big takeaways of don't get comfortable. Please don't get comfortable, right? So reassess, right? So as your business, like you're sitting down with your HR leaders as an RPO solutions provider, right? Things to be going well. You're talking to them. How's your business changing, right? How can we adapt with you, right? Because from a procurement standpoint, we get the phone calls, right? And we are buyers as well of RPO solutions too, right? And again, you just don't want to get comfortable. Never get comfortable. Even if things are working well. And again, Gloria, from our consulting days and in our days in industry, we've seen it. And Sherry, you may have as well, right? Where it's like, hey, things are running along year 1, year 2, year 3, and then all of a sudden there starts to be some challenges, right? And like I mentioned, internal, like your customers, right? Like an RPO, like enterprises don't like changing RPOs, right? It's not easy, right? So just to really stay like plugged in as well. I'll pause. Go, Gloria.
So from my perspective, I'm going to go back to what I call 3 big bubbles, right? Collaboration, the transparency, and the partnership, right? That's critical for both our talent acquisition folks and our RPO providers, right? If we as talent acquisition folks, HR people, whatever our titles are not transparent with our RPO providers with what we need, it sets them up to fail, right? And so the more information you can give them, the more successful they're going to be. But you also need to be prepared to ask all of your questions. And that is, if you're in that evaluation stage, how does your RPO solution fit our business model? Do we have the right one? What kind of technology do you bring to the party, right? What geographies are you going to be able to cover, right? Do you have the ability to customize your solutions to meet our specific needs, right? That is a big thing today because everybody is unique, whether they are or not. We feel we are unique, and that is just a human behavior, okay?
We're
Whatever
special.
it is, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
scalability.
Yeah.
Do the RPO providers have the ability to scale based on what your needs are going to be? Can they upscale? Can they go back? The fluidity, I think, is critical, especially these days, because we've seen what happens, right? So, you know, and are they aligned with your corporate culture? And corporate culture means so many different things these days. But, you know, those are some of the critical things that I think address both our talent acquisition folks as well as our RPO providers, right? If I put an RPO hat on, I'm going to want to know everything I possibly can. What does it look like today? What is your forecast? Do you have your staffing plan or what your expectations are for your staffing plan so we can begin to work, and that's our foundation. And then we will go, you know, then we can move forward from there. And what does it look like in year two? And today I think it is difficult for clients and companies to say, well, we're projecting this and next year we're going to projecting that. But I think you have to have a plan. We always have to have a plan because both parties then benefit from it. So I think that's advice for both TAs as well as RPO providers.
And even
That's
the
what
question
I
goes
would
to,
want.
yeah, dead on. Yes, dead on, fully aligned. But then also be ready for your tech roadmap too, right? So
Yep.
your HR leaders, as you're talking to an RPO provider, help me understand what's in your technology roadmap, right? Because you can learn a lot as you go through the procurement process with that. Because some, absolutely, here's our tech roadmap, here's more. Because also, hey, we can do it, all this good stuff, right? We've got the sales hat on, right? Good. Is it in place or is it in, development, right? Because those are sort of the aha moments. Okay, when is it going to be? Okay, are we going to be the first ones to help you build that out, right? Are we going to, have some are we going to need some band-aids and some bandages, right? Because we're going to learn together. So those are the types of things as well too, Gloria. I just want to plug that on as well, because that definitely is an important thing that you should ask from an HR TA standpoint, right? Of talk us through your technology roadmap.
Right.
You learn a lot in that, and just that very simple question, because some might be like, we'll get back to you on that. Or, oh, by the way, yes, here's where we are.
Here's where
That'll
we
give
are.
you a level of comfort. Yep.
Well, and that drives, and I know we're getting close to time here, but that drives one more piece of it, and that is the data and the analytics.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does the talent acquisition team want from the data? What can the RPO provider provide? And how frequently are we going to meet and discuss and look at those analytics and see where we're at? Another critical piece of it, because that's how we make judgments on our business needs, right? What we need, what are we at today? So it is and continues to be an exciting environment, just full of all kinds of opportunity, right? As I always say, it's all about talent, right?
Right, it is. And thank you both for staying right on time here. We are just
Are we looking? How many
exactly,
questions?
we are
Gloria, they're coming
exactly,
your way. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
we've got one question here, but
Okay.
I love, Michael, I just wanted to add that you just said, the talent roadmap, is it really in production, or are we going to learn about this together? That I think that's really key. And I think making buyers aware of that, whatever stakeholder level they may be or position they may be, making them aware of that and being honest with them about that is really key. Having been on the RPO side before as well. So I think that's something really important. So we have our first question here. I'll go ahead and read it out. There are many services that can fall under the HR services or professional services category, including RPO. From a procurement perspective, what sources do you rely on to stay up to date on the RPO industry? And how do you determine which vendors to include when issuing an RFI or an RFP?
I mean, again, there's a number of market intelligence firms that, and I've got my experience from consulting and so forth as well. Like, again, they go to the Gartners, and there's others as well. There's many to go to, but it's actually a blend, right? And it depends on the maturity of the procurement organization you're working with. They're going to have market intelligence that, again, readily available to help and partner with the HR business as well. But then also there's going to be input from our HR leaders as well too, right? To say, oh, by the way, we've been to conferences. So it's going to be a blend. I wish I could say there's like, hey, these one or two market intelligence providers are, the ones we would go to. It's a blend. Gloria, would you say anything different on that one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, from my perspective, in doing that research, I'm going to look across every periodical, and Sherry knows that about me. Lemay's has learned that about me, that whatever information is out there, I'm going to go get, and I'm going to look at, I'm going to do my research and break that down by my specific business. And are there providers that fit or have a specialization in my business, right? So.
Yeah.
And from my perspective and my experience, I would say, it depends, is a great answer as well, because there's lots of things that come into play, like, are we working across multiple geographies? Do they have that capability to do so, right? Do they provide more in the tech and the finance industry, or are they more in the high volume industry? So there's lots of different things that come into play here, and there's a lot of available research out there that we can all turn to that would lead us down that path in terms of who should we at least start to consider.